Hello everyone and welcome back to another Palworld video. In this video, I'm going to be breaking down all my best tips for getting your base running as efficiently as possible in this game. The tutorials, they don't share everything and there's not a lot of hand holding, but there's a lot of stuff that I've found along the way that helped save me a lot of hassle and time and ended up making my bases operate much more smoothly. So let's dive into the list here. Some of these will be basic tips, some more advanced. But the first thing that I want to talk about, it has to do with base placement tips. So my first base was placed very poorly because obviously I didn't know any better, but my second base is phenomenal in terms of placement and operation. First, let me show you on the map where this base is. So if you like it, you are free to use this same spot too. It's fine by me. This spot has a lot going for it. First, let me talk about base defense. As you expand your base, it's going to become the primary target of some serious raiding parties of pals and hostile human groups too. But this location is literally perfect because no hostile enemies can ever make it into your base. They can't do it. You can actually just completely ignore all raiding parties and they'll eventually just give up and go away. Because half of the base has a huge drop-off cliff into the ocean below, so they can't come from that direction. The other half has a huge cliff wall behind it, so they can't drop down from above or they'll die. It's the most defensible base location that I have found yet, and it's got more going for it than just that, which I'll get to in a minute. But when these raiding parties come, you can ignore them completely, or you can move up into the rocks and kill them all. They won't even fight back because enemy AI, they'll be trying to find a way down to your base instead of focusing on you. So it's free XP, it's free resources. So I highly recommend finding a base location like this one, or just use this one on your own too. I don't have to build defenses, I don't have to build walls, I don't have to build outposts, none of that. It's just not an issue at all. The next thing I want to talk about in terms of base placement is more geographical in nature. So don't put it right next to a fast travel tower. Your base PAL box is a fast travel station already, so there's no need to be redundant there. Also, make sure the ground is nice and flat, so you can build everything you need without having to lay down tons of foundations and making the ground all wonky and uneven. And finally, make sure that there's ore nearby, because stone and wood can be farmed at your base easily with the quarry and the logging builds that you can make, but ore has to be obtained organically. This location here has a giant ore boulder that spawns right in the middle of it, and it respawns all the time, so I can just farm my ore easily whenever it pops up without leaving the base. Otherwise, you can mark locations on your map, like this one, that has lots of ore boulders available to you and close to fast travel stations should you ever need it, but I don't have to do that very often because the ore is right there in my base. Next tip, let's talk about resource storage. The pals in this game are not very smart. They'll get stuck in trees, they'll fall off cliffs, they'll climb onto rooftops and never come down and starve to death up there. There's a lot that can go wrong with the pal pathing in this game. So one of the best things you can do is make sure that you have short and clear paths between the resource nodes and the boxes you want those resources stored in. So build a storage container right next to your quarry and put all of your stone in it. Then your pals will just pick it up and drop it right into the box instead of walking all the way across the base area to a separate chest. This will make them more efficient too and stop them from getting stuck as often. But if they do get stuck, because they do that from time to time, you can just go to the PAL box and remove them from the base roster and then drop them right back in. It takes seconds and they're fixed, no problem. Speaking of which, another tip, if you didn't know this already, is that if you want a PAL to do a specific task, you can just walk up to them, pick them up, and carry them to the task that you want them to perform and throw them at it. It seems a little inhumane, but it's the only way they gave us to designate a specific task for someone. Okay, now let's chat about pals and what they can do at the base. So this system is more complex than you might think at first glance. Pals have what we call work suitability. This is a list of all the base tasks that they are capable of performing. Some pals are jacks of all trades. They can store items, they can mine, they can do logging. They have a number of things that they're suited to do. And then others will be specialists, where they can only really be proficient in one kind of task. I like having a mix here. Some pals that are versatile and some that are specialists. I find it helpful, for example, to have pals that only do kindling. So they go back and forth between making my iron ingots to cooking meals for the camps. Because I've got some big pals now that eat a lot. Also, you might find that as you continue exploring, you'll get stronger pals. Your starting pals are going to get pretty useless pretty fast. They'll only be level 1 in their work suitabilities, while later pals will be 2 or even 3 times more efficient in those same tasks. So make sure you don't get too attached to your little working chicken. Swap them out when the time is right. The next thing I want to talk about is something I completely overlooked at first, and that's passive skills. These are randomly rolled on a pal when you encounter them. So your new Fox Sparks might be better than your higher level current Fox Sparks based on their passives that they roll with. So always inspect your pals to see if they'll be better suited for base operations than field combat. For example, I have a pal that has a passive that gives them a massive debuff in combat, but the trade-off is that they have a massive buff to their work efficiency. So he is always working at the base for me. Some passives make pals consume less food on the job, which is helpful. But some passives are downright unhelpful. Some passives, highlighted in red, will actually reduce their productivity and increase their laziness. So make sure you inspect your pals and have the right pal on the job. Some of them will be worthless just based on their passive traits alone. So that's why it's worthwhile sometimes to go out and capture repeat versions of the same pal just to see if you can get a better passive trait. Another tip, I found that it's best to have things like feeding stations and the pal spa outdoors and easily accessible. This broke my whole vibe of wanting to have a nice cozy spa room on the second floor of my house. I found that pals pathing is tricky, and when you put more obstacles in between them and their food and their recreational activities, obstacles even as simple as a single door or a single flight of stairs, it can sometimes be difficult for them to get there quickly, and they're more likely to get stuck somewhere along the way. So try to have those things out in the open and easily accessible. This is especially important if the pals you have working are large. I found that my chillet had a hard time getting to the icebox because it's small and it's sitting under a low one-story awning. So the chillet kept going onto the roof to access it, but then would get stuck up there. My pen king would go to operate the mill and make flour, but he always tries to access it from behind, and there's a huge drop off down to the ocean below, and he kept actually getting knocked unconscious by falling off the cliff. So always make sure that you are keeping pal pathing in mind when putting things in their places. Lastly, let's talk about moving things around your base. If you want to move all of your stone or all of your wood or anything like that to a different container, you can take all of it at once, even though it over encumbers you and makes it so you can't move an inch. Just use a grappling hook to get from the old chest to the new chest, and you can move around that way. But also, just know that you can't move any items or structures that you've built. If you don't like where you placed something, you'll have to just go into build mode, select deconstruct, and destroy that object or that structure and get the items back in your inventory, and then go build it again in the new location that you want. Hopefully this gets patched later on, but as of right now, there's no moving objects around after you've built them. Alright, so those are my tips for base building right now, and I think I'll do a follow-up video for more advanced base operations later for those of you who are starting to get out of the early stages and hitting, like level 30, even level 40 and on up, because things change a lot in the game. So we'll have to talk more about advanced base mechanics for sure. But if you found this video helpful, hey, would you do me a favor and leave a like on it, as that's the best way to support the video and help it reach a wider audience. And feel free to subscribe for additional Palworld videos. Be warm and well fed, my friends, and I hope to catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.